so that those who couldn't come here can review and listen in, or if you forgot something you want to listen in, you can do that too. So all of this time together is shared on the Capital City Unity YouTube channel. And so, Janet, if you want to go back and listen to some of the stuff from the beginning, it's there for you if you want. So what we're doing here is we're reading together the Unity Correspondence Course, originally developed by Charles Fillmore and his team 100 years or so or more ago, back in the days before the internet, back in the days before television, back in the days before radio. The way we shared information was by printed word, and this correspondence course was sent out, mailed out to anybody around the world that wanted to know more about this unity thing, this healing thing, this prosperity thing that was going on out of uh, Kansas City, Missouri. And they would get these courses. There were 8 initial courses, and then there were 12 advanced courses, or lessons, I should say. They came with questions, and I'm going to put up the one that we're working on now. So we're working on the second of the lessons. The first one was the silence, and now we're working on healing. And so what Mark Hicks has done is he's taken the questions that are asked in each lesson and he's put them up in places where the potential answers might be. So, for example, here we read, is it possible to heal all diseases? And I believe this is where we stopped last week. And we take a look, we read the text together, we read the notations, and then we open it up for conversation and discussion. Some of us may have some insights into the what is being offered here. Some of us may have questions. Some of us may disagree with what's being said, and we're just here to share with each other and learn from one another. All of us here are truth students, and most of us have been doing this work for a long time. So we may have some wisdom, as it said in today's daily word. So I know that I believe we ended up last week in this number 7 here, but I thought we might 7 and 8. I thought we might reread this if and as a great way to get started. So who would be willing to read paragraphs 7 and 8?
I would.
Okay, thanks.
The overall topic is disease and healing. Is it possible to heal all diseases? The belief in the power and the reality of disease is itself one cause for the appearance of disease in the body. When men see that there is no truth in such a belief, they let go of it, and the appearance then yields readily, not having the sustaining force of thought to keep it in evidence. A law was stated by Jesus when he said, "According to your faith, be it done to you." Those who believe in disease as a reality have faith in it. They get the results according to the application of their faith faculty, and some form of physical error keeps manifesting in their lives. 8. All causes are mental. Everything starts in mind as an idea or concept of some idea. If we want to manifest health, we must think of the life idea, build a concept of it, and see it manifesting in us as health. Then the law, according to your faith, will work for us to bring about health in the body. On the footnotes, according to your faith, the secret of healing lies in the lifting up the consciousness by faith into the realm of God perfection, thus clearing the way for God's original perfect healing to be done in the body. Life idea. The term life idea is used repeatedly in the lessons. It is a divine idea that vitalizes living power in human beings. As we commune with God in the silence of our own soul, we become conscious of God as life and of ourselves as heirs to this life.
Thanks, Della. So any thoughts? Any insights or any questions, any disagreements?
I volunteered to start this because I wanted to make a comment to the group and to Suzanne specifically, because when we finished this topic last week, she had an interesting idea about kind of the spirit self and the physical body self. And um, having an illness or an ailment that is benefited by medication doesn't mean your spiritual self is in error completely. I don't know if I interpreted that correctly, but it was a thoughtful approach to people who are benefiting from medication.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Any?
Well, this is a hard one for me, and I missed last week, but it's almost like if you're walking around unhealthy or unwell, it's because it's on you, like you're not strong enough, or you're not aligned enough. So I don't know about that. I mean, I don't know if that's, maybe I don't know. That's a tough one. That's just a tough one. Makes me feel like the person who's ill is the vic is blame the victim, as they say.
Yeah, and somebody, I think it was Susan last week, raised the question of what about little children who are born with birth defects or other diseases? Same question. Is a little
Yeah.
infant thinking wrong? So we agreed, Claudia, last week that we would keep that question open and see if after we read all of the information in this lesson, that see if there's any insight to that conundrum that you've raised.
Well, as Dorothy always said, everyone dies healed. I always thought that was an interesting comment. Um, so maybe there's different levels of healing, the soul level versus the physical level.
Hmm.
Anybody else on this these two paragraphs?
Can you hear me? Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
Um, if the question is it possible to heal all diseases? Personally, I have to think, yeah, for sure. It's God, isn't it? Isn't everything God? So yes, it's possible. I mentally again, I believe that's the truth. But what I also question is, oh God, help thou mine unbelief. The part of me that doesn't quite come over the cusp of the healing itself. It's a hard one for me too, Claudia. um, yes, the belief is there, but manifesting it, I think, is the slip betwixt the cups and the lip.
Okay.
That's it.
Thanks, Diane.
Uh-huh.
Do we just start to talk or do we raise our hand or how does this work?
Well, you can raise your hand and or you can just
Start.
get going.
Okay. Well, I will say God got me here on the right day at the right time because this is a question I have really been carrying around with me. I have been in the belief that God heals me to the degree I'm meant to be healed since 2003 when I had a ruptured brain aneurysm and I did not take medication in the follow-up year, whatever. And over these years, which I guess is now more than 20, right? I firmly believe that we may not be healed 100%, but we're healed to the degree that God wants me to be healed, which then impacts what I can do and I can't do. My big question is I have two very annoyed grown children, a 40-year-old and a 38-year-old, who are continually sending me links, sending me news, telling me things I should be taking that it would make me a new lease on life. I would be back to being 40, that I'm being selfish and mean-spirited just because I've heard, just because you think God's going to heal you, you're not here in service to us in the way you could be if you were taking medication. And I don't have the answer. I have not agreed yet, and I haven't started taking anything. But I question it. What is expected of us as spiritual beings that believe God's in charge?
Tough one.
Well, the power is in the question, so let's stay open to that. Thank you, Janet. Anybody else on this? Yes, Susan.
I was going to say something else, but I just have a strong thought about Janet, about what she said. And my belief is that medicine is not the end-all, do-all answer to every illness. And we have to listen to our hearts. And furthermore, they don't test medications for every effect it has on the body. Sometimes the side effects of medications are so bad that it's worse than what they were trying to heal.
Yeah.
So I had to share those thoughts. I think it's so important that we stay with our faith, and sometimes we cannot be sure that we're not making mistakes, but we just live on faith, and we have to do that. And it upsets me that so many people have medications forced on them that we don't know if they're doing any good. And I look back to the teachings of the Fillmores, and I think they did a lot more good for us than all the medications in the world have. Mm-hmm. I also had an experience this summer where I injured myself, and it was so hard because I wasn't used to being in pain. And what I came away from that, and I took very little medication because I as you can tell, I'm not a real fan of medication, but I came away from that experience with a profound change in my attitude, because I realized how hard it is for people who have to live in pain all the time. And many do. I have much more empathy now. My question is to the group, do you feel that sometimes experiences are sent to us as learning experience and they manifest as health problems?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
Oh.
One of the principles that I live my life by is that life happens for me, not to me.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
So if life happens for me and not to me, therefore everything that happens is a potential learning opportunity. But the thing for me, that Susan, you actually touched on this. It's here. It's about belief. And the thing in our Unity work, and we saw this in the first lesson on the silence, and also in some of the paragraphs above in the healing, that we're working on consciousness here.
Mm-hmm.
The Fillmore idea is that God is infinite, universal, unchanging principle. And the human being is part of that. But we're created in a way that we don't get that. We don't get that when we're born. We're not conscious of that. And our work is learning to become conscious of that. And there's a number of things that are available to us to help facilitate that. And what we're talking about here is, our struggle with this. And that's why I love the question here. Is it possible to heal all diseases? Diane says, yes, it's possible, and yet it doesn't happen.
Marty, to layer onto what you're saying, you're talking about God mind, and wisdom is knowing what the situation is and what to do about it. So I think that covers a lot of territory in as to whether to take drugs or whatever other things are. Your wisdom is when you talk to the doctor and he says, well, uh, you cut your finger and it's bleeding there, and what you should do is put a Band-Aid on it. And that's maybe an oversimplification, but I think that cuts across the many of the things we're talking about.
Can it be said also that one manifests healing according to the consciousness you carry closest to your heart? I mean, as you truly believe is what you manifest in your life. And I guess I've got a lot of growing to do because I had a lot of aches and pains that I've not mastered yet. But I would like to, and I'm working on it.
Yeah.
I'd like to point out, this is Martha. In the first sentence in number 7, it says the belief in the power and the reality of disease is itself one cause for the appearance of disease. Well, where does it discuss what other causes are? Because in 8 it says all causes are mental. So I'm seeing, maybe I simply don't understand, which is very possible, but I don't see the logic here. I see a lapse of logic.
Okay.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, that it does say one cause for their appearance, the power of the belief.
Mm-hmm. The belief. No, the belief is one cause. The belief in the power, the belief is one cause. Well, what are the other causes?
It seems to me that what he was trying to say is that belief in the power, belief that there is disease is the basis for experiencing disease itself.
But it says it's just one cause for the appearance of disease. And when people see that there's no truth in such belief, they let go of it. Then the appearance leads to readily. All right, but
Maybe that goes to children that are born, when we're born with something that's dis-ease or discomfort in our bodies. I don't know, Martha, that's a really good point.
In the in the middle of the COVID experience, Mark Hicks, the gentleman who creates this website that we're reading this stuff on, he dug out an essay or a sermon that Charles Fillmore gave on little critters, talking about germs and viruses and the relationship between our belief and healing. And I'll see if I can dig that out and maybe we can take a look at that. Because what I was thinking in Martha's question is what are other causes of diseases? Well, viruses cause disease. Bacteria cause disease. Accidents can cause disease. And again, all of the question here is the way I read this is it's a question of belief. So the belief in the power and the reality of disease is what we're talking about here. And then when we see there is no truth in such a belief, we let go of it. And that was and all of this stuff, can you see how all of this stuff is based on Myrtle Fillmore's experience with stopping believing that she had tuberculosis, essentially, and replacing that belief that she had tuberculosis with the belief that she was whole, complete, healthy, vital, thriving. And so that's, I think, where, she had this experience, and then later on, the Charles and she and their colleagues in this work tried to put words to what happened. And sometimes we get caught up in the words, and we sometimes forget the actual experience itself.
And didn't he as a result of an injury, have one leg shorter than the other, and then he grew his leg longer.
Mhm.
Charles, I'm talking about. So he applied that same technique
Right.
of going to source and going to headquarters, as he called it, and talking directly and making that extension.
Right. So what
I
the
think what's hard to accept is that it takes a long time.
yes.
Myrtle talks about it being 2 years. I'm guessing it probably was more than 2 years when she refused to admit the reality of anything being wrong with her. That is a pretty advanced soul that's able to do that in the first place when they're suffering from active tuberculosis. And I I've always forgiven myself for my lack of success in healing or whatever, because I think you're just not in it for the long haul. You Once I understood the 2 year mark, I kind of mapped that out for myself and I thought, okay, in 2 years you're going to be fine. But what was happening is I was aging at the same time. So that while my health was improving in the cause of the sickness or illness, there also was other things happening that were still making me not feel like I was 50. And I kept feeling it that God was failing me or missing seeing me in the line. But all that was happening was I was being healed, but I also was in the nature. Nature just doesn't keep the same person going at the same level of being. And it's when I talk to people about this, it's a hard sell to say, no, don't take that pain medication. Wait 2 years, you'll be fine. Trust God. So it doesn't confuse me, but it does show me that there is a level of spiritual wholeness and health that has to be part of this process of self-healing and and refusing medication in such a society that's so determined that they're going to give you a pill to make you feel better. So
Well, and then there's the placebo effect and the notion that um, whenever I take medications, so I take some medication for blood pressure, high blood pressure. I believe that that medication helps my blood pressure.
mhm.
So the question is it my faith or is it the actual chemistry of the pill that I'm taking, or is it both that's helping me keep my blood pressure where I want it to be? So I still think it goes back to belief, and that's what we're working on here. In fact, that's kind of, Janet, what I heard you say. It's like continuing to develop our belief. And what you said, or what I heard you say, is that it's perfectly okay to notice that things are changing around us. We're getting older, the world's changing, et cetera, et cetera. That's part of God reality. That's the in Unity we call that the flow. There's a flow that's going on.
Mhm.
Along the lines of the placebo effect, there's a wonderful book it's been out for quite a while, called Cure, and it's by Jo Marchant, Marchant, and she documents the placebo effect, even to the point of back surgery. Janet, what I heard you say too was, so you set the marker at 2 years. So your faith marker was 2 years.
Well, I was
And
copying Myrtle.
I,
That was
I know. So you got the Myrtle prescription going there, you know. Maybe, if you'd said, well, screw this, I've got all her writings, I can do it in 10 months, you know, what would that have looked like? I don't know. It's interesting how we set these markers and we're not even sometimes aware of our unconscious belief in our health. I mean, now we're old because we're 70 because somebody said we were, we got Medicare at 65. So now we're old, so who are we? So it's the mind is so very powerful. But pulling it up to this, if you're not healed, if you're not well, if you're not healthy, you're falling below the mark here in terms of your faith is just a hard one to work with.
Well, I'd like to also comment on that, Claudia. I think you brought up a good point. There isn't really a time limit. It's how spirit is working within you and how you are working within your own spirit. I think you brought up there was a couple of things when you first talked about with your children and unpacking, and I think the challenge unpacking a lot of this, because I think your children add in another element to you, and that is there's a lot of fear from your children on that you will die
Mhm.
and you will not be there for them. And I think it's challenging, I think, for someone who believes strongly in what is right for you spiritually, that you're aligning your beliefs, what feels authentic and resonates deep within your own sense of spirituality, to your children, because you don't have the fear. I'm not. I'm just speaking for you,
It's
and I don't
true.
know if that's true. Your
It's true.
children have the fear,
Yeah.
and I think Claudia might be right. It's like maybe in your mind you said, okay, 2 years. If Myrtle can do it in 2 years, I can do it in 2 years. Well, maybe your body, which is different than more than Myrtle, like saying, well, I think I need more time as we're working through this, and as you're gaining alignment and inner knowing with your higher consciousnesses, as you work
Hmm.
through aligning your spirituality with your physicality,
Okay.
and you're exploring more, and there's more self-reflection as the time goes on, and you're learning more, and that will probably also change how you look at your dis-ease. And but in the other side is your children are fearful, and that's hard
Right.
to alleviate their fear when you have such a strong belief in what you are doing is right for you, and you're aligned with
Huh?
exactly what you're doing. And
Yep.
that's something they're going to have to, I think, accept, especially if you're in peace with it.
Well, I'm gotten much more aggressive about talking about I live every day in a 24-hour window, and I go one day at a time to be as well as I can, do as much as I can, but continue to listen to spirit. And I have pointed out to both of my kids, you need to get on this bus and not be telling me or ignoring me or not wanting to do this or that, because you do not know. I don't know how long you'll be here. You don't know how long I'll be here. I could leave the earth plane today, and they don't want to hear it. But I don't, it's reality. And it's spirituality, and it's a spiritual belief. But even if you didn't have that, it's still real. No one is going to guarantee the healthiest person. How many healthy people do we know that drop dead? And my son was born in a hospital, and I made friends with my roommate. Their boys grew up together. When he was 35, he had a heart thing happen in the night, and he died in his bed. And my son was, I said,
Right.
well, you got to learn from this. And I also just want to add that when I put these time limits on things, as the time is approaching, when the time is coming, I start being willful, bossy, telling God what I'm going to do or not going to do, joining things, volunteering for things. I start running around, and then I get flattened again. And it's happened enough that I know I am not following God's will for me, how I spend my time, and what feels like a useful spiritual person living in the world. I have to, I wanted to be more involved with whatever this is. I mean, it's not, I didn't like Unity in its form that I was introduced to it years ago, but I really like this Fillmore idea. And I want to be part of it, knowing people that believe the things that I believe and that will be helpful instead of saying, you're getting a little bit out there. I really think you need to take this or take that, and the thing with the kids. But I also know that if I had stayed on what God had laid out for me and lived in the way I was being shown to live, I probably would feel pretty good right now. And I keep taking it back. And that's just willful. And Myrtle seemed to have gotten past that. She would listen to her guidance, she would follow it to the letter. And I'm working on it.
All right,
I
great.
can't get away from the idea that there are reasons for us to be ill other than bad thinking or not thinking correctly, whatever you want to call it. And again, I cite my lesson that I learned from something not really good happening to me. And I'm also citing the fact that if Fillmore had not had tuberculosis, we would not be sitting here learning all of this today. So sometimes there are things that are going on that we can't articulate.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Well said. So let's see what the next articulation here is anyway. In paragraph 9, who would like to read?
Read. That's okay.
Okay.
Since we are the offspring of God, why have we appeared to be unlike him? What is the basis of our faith in health? It is understanding of the real nature of God and of ourself as his offspring. God is perfection, wholeness. His offspring must be like him. So it is very evident that we have had wrong concepts about ourselves if we have considered imperfections as being real and enduring. We have thought ourselves so different from God that it seems sacrilegious to claim our God-likeness. Every idea, every thought we have is like a seed, and it produces after its kind. The thought of man's unlikeness to God has worked out in appearances that are the image of the thought that produced them. Appearances cannot be changed except by going back into mind and correcting the thoughts that are making the error appearances. Such changes are accomplished by a transforming of thoughts so that they harmonize with the ideas of divine mind, God. Nothing is accomplished by working in the external alone. Men have tried that for ages without success. Analysis of our thoughts determines whether the beliefs back of them have their foundation in wholeness and perfection, or whether they are based upon the limited concepts about life that have been built through ignorance of truth. And the annotations, the first one, let's see. Appearances cannot be changed except by going back into mind and correcting the thoughts. Continue to repeat those words. God is healing me now. Is to fill the mind and heart and body temple, its cells and atoms, so full of this awareness that there is no room left for fear or doubt. Further persistence in repeating the words, God is healing me now, is to become so fully saturated with this truth that it begins to overflow your mind and body and fill the atmosphere around you. The very air you breathe, your environment, will begin to vibrate with the power of the thought, God is healing me now. Wow.
Yeah.
And there you have it, folks.
Thoughts?
I've always thought God is not on my timetable like Myrtle's 2 years. She's on God's, so am I. I'm on God's timetable, and I don't really know what that literally the timetable is going to be. Often, if I have a problem or a healing, I think, I need it now, God. And God says, uh-huh, and goes about it. But it doesn't mean that it happens now. It just means it happens in non-time or God time. That's sort of my take on it.
Thanks, Diane. Anybody else?
I think that we have all, in our own selves, but also in other people that we've seen around us, seen people who get sicker because they're so afraid or they're so convinced that they're sick. You know, the mind is really very, very powerful. So I think that there is a lot that we can do to tap into this healthiness that is available to us. But it says up here in paragraph 9, nothing is accomplished by working in the external alone. So that implies that there are some things that you can do if you choose to, but they're not, but that by itself, without believing that you are healthy, that you are strong, that you're connected, you're part of God, the external by itself, you'll still be miserable. You do make your own happiness. You do make your own reality in so many ways. But I think we can take advantage of what we've learned about medicine and choose to use the ones that make sense for us.
Thanks, Martha. Others? Anybody else?
And was it Meister Eckhart or whoever said, when you pray, move your feet? In other words, you just can't. Who was it?
The Quakers say that.
Oh, when you pray, move your feet, because you just can't leave it to God. Like was said that, oh, I'm getting old. Forget, oh, I'm getting older now. Of course, I'm not going to feel the same way. Not so. I mean, I'm going to be 90 next week, and I've got good health. I can, outrun any of my friends. So you have to move your feet.
I'd like to try to say something.
Yeah,
I've never
Rhonda.
talked about this probably with anyone, but my mother had rheumatoid arthritis that was totally and became more and more incapacitating over our lives. And I remember as a child, I asked her, Mom, why don't you take some pain medicine? Made sense to my little child mind. And she said, I don't ever want anything to be in more control of me than I am. And that's really the way she thought and felt about a lot of medicines, a lot of different medicines, that she was going to work with God and handle this. I do wish that she had, instead of just giving me the words that she did and her living example, which it was phenomenal. But I wish that she had explained to me that she was turning this over to God and that she and God were working on this. And it was going to be, maybe she could have even used the word mysterious or something like that. Because as a child, I was too concrete I could have been elevated, but I was too concrete to get there myself. And if I had known, and I would have believed that despite all appearances, she and God would be working together. Because I didn't have any other explanation from her. And she was in just horrible pain, lots of doctor's appointments, became grossly disformed, all of those things. At the same time, I just think that it could have been explained to me in ways that I would have understood on a child's level, and it would have helped me a great deal.
Thanks, Rhonda.
Mm-hmm.
For me, the key of this paragraph is this one. It is understanding the real nature of God and of ourselves as his offspring. And this goes back to Myrtle's famous line, I'm a child of God, I do not inherit disease. The question is, what is my role in generating this understanding? This is this is, I think, Lillian, where your notion of putting feet to our prayers is real. It's like this understanding doesn't come by my sitting around and waiting for it. I have something to do to cooperate with God to generate this understanding.
Hmm. Well, Marty, when I read this, it all brought back we are created in, we are offspring of God or created in God's image. And I think the traditional thought was our bodies were created in God's image. You have the Sistine Chapel with God putting the spark of life to Adam. So I think people thought that our bodies were God, the God image, and that there should be no disease or illness. But what I'm learning is that it's our higher consciousness, our spirituality that was created as God-like, or in the image of God, as an offspring of that. And to meld those two is a huge step because we think that most of us grew up with a separate God out there, not an internal God. And I think that change in learning and exploring and developing and understanding that internal spirituality is within us. Our bodies are just our bodies. I don't necessarily know, God created our body. God created the energy because when our bodies go, the energy, the spirituality, the God mind is still there. And it maybe is just housed in something else, or not. So I think we put a great deal of pressure on ourselves to make our bodies perfect in God's image. And I think perfection is different for everyone. For Lillian, she has a very strong physical and spiritual self. Not everyone has those fantastic genes of the body. So what body you were assigned as your consciousness came into this world, that's the body you're working with. And whether it takes 1 month, 6 months, 2 years, a lifetime, you just don't know. You're constantly working with that body as it changes.
Mhm.
Yeah, and what you're saying puts me in mind, as things so often do, of the golden key. It's put my focus on God, and then because the body, the way I'm hearing you talk about it, Suzanne, the body's a condition in that sense. Put your mind on God and not the condition. So if I want health, then I want to focus on this, understanding the real nature of God and myself as his offspring, and then see what happens and work with the result. And this is, I think, the challenge that I certainly have. I dare say many of us here have is the habit of focusing on God no matter what's going on.
Are you saying to make that habit?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the
So
challenge, to wake up in the morning and know that God's present, and no matter how grumpy I feel or happy I feel, that it's about God and not about the conditions.
I don't know if this is a unity word or not. So if it isn't, I'm sorry. But I live with Christ consciousness and I seek always to, I don't think about God a lot. I think an awful lot about the Christ consciousness and trying to elevate my personality and my soul. And I also think the soul and the personality are in a ratio race. And as I get older, I hope that my soul energy is stronger than my personality energy, and that I can live from that place in the decisions I make, actions, reactions in a course of a day. And I also I had polio as a kid. And I think from that starting point in 1955, it changes everything. When you have like really serious death, death is right there. Go back into spirit, and then you're commissioned to stay alive. Everything changes. And I'm very, very grateful for the spiritual partnerships I've had through my whole life. Um, and I'm seeing it with you people here. Like you've got this strong spirit energy, and I've been missing that. I don't belong to a church. I've tried different religions, and I have a lot of crazy friends who have all kinds of answers for things. So, and they're not mine. They tolerate me, and I also do believe in the power of meditation, silent meditation, no voices, no guided. Sit silently with God, and Christ will help me do the next right thing, I believe. But I'd like to know other people that believe the same thing. So
You came to the right place.
I think
You know,
so.
it occurs to me when we look at the big picture and all that Unity teaches and so forth, we I think accept the fact that in the universe there's an answer for almost everything, and yet we're focusing here on our health, and that is one aspect of us connecting with the universe to bring about healing, and so it's interesting. The question, I think, whether Myrtle Fillmore was in her consciousness of healing, whether it was her body that did the healing as much as it was the connection with the universe, and it all connecting to go together to bring about that healing. And so we're focused on just one aspect of it. And I think back years ago when Diane and I were first married, I had a situation at work, and I said, well, if this doesn't change in 2 years, I'm going to do thus and so. And I dropped it right there, didn't think about it again. Exactly 2 years to the day, the changes for me came about, and a blessing that went from there forth. So, we need to put all this together.
Sometimes there is a timeline, huh?
Maybe.
Yeah, Gail, you have to unmute yourself, okay?
I guess it does help if I
It
unmute
does.
yeah, we talked in the previous paragraph about the fact that it said the belief that disease is real is one cause, and the question was, what are other causes? And it seems there's one answer in this paragraph. The thought of man's unlikeness to God has worked out in appearances that are the image of the thought that produced them, that's another cause of dis-ease, is the thought of man's unlikeness to God, the belief in that. First, we believe disease is real, and then we believe that we are not heir to those things that are of God, which we talked about a week or so ago, I think.
Wow, that's a good one. The thought of, yeah.
That's a fundamental understanding in Unity, or the Fillmores, is that everything is that the manifest world is an outworking of a thought, a mind, an idea. And so what this is saying here, Gail, is that as I read this, is that if I have the idea that I'm unlike God, that's going to work its way into all the appearances of the outward manifestation in my life. And then the opposite is also true.
So can we say that we have already manifested what we truly believe?
I say I'm always
Ooh.
manifesting what I truly believe.
You know, I don't know. That's an interesting point because I think it again goes to assuming that the body will is exactly in God's image. And I think someone last week brought up Stephen Hawking's, and Stephen Hawking's was complete and perfect, but his body was not. But his mind, he lived in his mind. He lived with a higher consciousness, and I think he was linked so heavily to the God consciousness that he was able to think beyond the parameters of what normal people would. I could never understand a lot of what he where his mind went. So I think that goes back to assuming that we are thinking our bodies have diseases. Someone said, I think Susan brought it up when your a child is born into this world with that. And I that's something I'm still wrestling with because I think the body is can be subservient to the mind. I think you can do that, but I think it's still a separate entity. It's a physicalness that the mind is housed in, the higher consciousness, the Christ self, that your spirituality, your soul is within. So I have a hard time with that one, thinking that we manifest the physical. But then again, Vernon, you might be talking about other things that of a physical nature or a sadness or a mental health, something like that. I don't know.
Well, we have just a couple minutes before it's time to wrap up. So any last thoughts about anything that was shared today or anything that we read?
I want to go back to Janet's point about the Christ self that she referred to and the body and the soul and and go back to something that's helpful for me when I get in this kind of place. And that's Emily Cady's description of individuality and personality, that we are both. The personality being who you show up, Janet, in Boston there with your wonderful accent and the life that you lived. That's Janet, that's the personality. And then Emily would say that the individuality, that God's spark of you, that Christ consciousness. So Emily Cady saw us as comprised of those two things. The personality that, me, Claudia, and the individuality, that spiritual God spark of me, that Christ or higher consciousness. And some people talk about it as body and soul. And I think of it the same thing as what Emily Cady was saying.
I did already. I did.
The body is that physical that shows up, and the soul is that higher consciousness of us. So yeah, we're there. It's just hard to keep reminding. It's hard for me to keep reminding myself of where I am on that continuum. Trying to move more to the individuality as opposed to the personality.
You're a wonderful reminder because that's probably where I got the idea in the first place years ago. I love her stuff. I love it. And I know she and Myrtle were very close and they fed off each other's spirit. And I think that the word was different. I don't think of it as exactly the way you call it. What word did you say? Individual something?
Individuality versus personality. Personality is how we show
Oh,
up
I
as
know, soul.
Claudia.
I think of it as soul. Soul and personality are the two different things. But I saw that again the other day and I thought, oh, this is what you're always talking about. She just talks about it in a different way. So,
well, she calls it soul individuality because she calls it the individualized spark of God within us. So that's
right,
kind of how her soul definition
right.
falls.
Okay.
All right. Well, I thank everybody for being part of this, being part of feeding this soul and all the souls here in the room. And as always, let's close out by saying our prayer for protection together. The light
The
of
light of
God
God
surrounds
surrounds us.
the
The
love
love of God
enfolds
enfolds us.
the
The
power
power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us.
wherever we
Wherever we
are.
are,
All
God
is
is,
healthy.
and all is well.
Thank you.
All right,
We're
brothers and
doing better.
sisters.
Thank you.
Blessings.
Where
Thanks,
do I go to
Bob.
get a written copy of this? This is the correspondence course, and I think Mark's got it on one of his things. Is that right? This is
It's
the
on,
correspondence course.
it's on his
Yeah.
it's on the Truth Unity website.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there's the other thing, the wings. I don't know the difference between the wings and the correspondence course, but
Well, the
like
Fillmore
this.
Wings, the Fillmore Wings is his institutional setting for these kinds of works.
So this thing from the Fillmores is called the correspondence course.
That was their
Yes.
original, they called it the
Okay.
correspondence course, and the Fillmore Wings is where on Mark's webpage you can find the Unity Correspondence Course.
Okay.
And what do we use for this meeting? What would be most helpful for me joining with y'all?
In terms of what?
I don't know because I don't know enough about what's available. I've heard what you're saying.
Did you get my email?
I don't know whether I have or not, but I will
I
check.
sent you the email yesterday, and
I haven't seen it then.
okay, so check it out because there are links to
Perfect.
the website where all of the text for this course is.
Perfect,
And
Marty.
there's
Thank
also
you.
a link to the YouTube channel where the earlier versions of this previous weeks are you can
Wow.
watch.
Okay.
Great, great. Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And Janet, do you want to be on the email list?
Oh, I would love to. Yes.
All right, so you got to tell me,
Want me to put you in the chat?
yeah,
Is
if
that
you don't
easy for
mind.
you? I can do that.
And then I can just add you to the email list.
Wonderful.
I better go do it right now before I get lost in my own mind.
I hear you.
Bye-bye.
Check it out.
Yeah.
What nice people. I love this. I felt like everyone was talking the same language, different opinion, but same language. And I don't often find that in the circles I travel in.
I remember the first time I went to the Unity Church that this work all came out of, and I just knew I'd come home.
Yeah.
You know what, though? That was so interesting because I found Myrtle Fillmore before I thought about Unity Church or anything. And then I looked up the church and I was so disappointed.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh no, this is not the same thing. And then all these years later to see it advertised, or I've been trying to follow what the politics are, but my instinct was right that it wasn't the same thing, and that what I read in the original writings is what I believe. And
Right.
so I'm going to look, if I go into YouTube and look up your church, I'll find you and these different things. Is that
So
right?
Capital City Unity.
Okay.
That's what you search for when you get to YouTube.
In YouTube. Okay, wonderful. Well, I
you
hope I see you next week, and thank you so
see-
much.
You can see 3 years of my talks there if you want.
Excellent. Wow, perfect. I'll learn a lot. Have a great day.
All right, glad you could join us. See you, Rhonda.